Hollywood seems to be running out of new ideas, which could be a big reason why its $200 million movies are tanking. It doesn't matter if they were formerly sure things like Marvel and DC, or prestige films like Killers of the Flower Moon, they were all duds at the 2023 box office. A few films aside, 2023 wasn't the most inspiring year for movies, and 2024 isn't looking much better. Frankly, it's looking more and more like these blood-sucking studios have sucked all their IP dry, and their familiar producers who can't seem to drum up virgin IP keep trying to convince the bloodsuckers they're doing all they can. But there was one producer, aka One Renfield, who managed to do the impossible: Basil Iwanek. His last movie, John Wick Chapter 4, was the first of the franchise to cost over $100 million, and it managed to bring in over $440 million at the worldwide box office. It was another big win for the Baba Yaga, but this video isn't about the fourth John Wick. It's about the first, and how Hollywood failed to recognize how one hitman's homicidal rampage to avenge his dead dog wrote the new playbook on how to build original movie franchises in this IP era of Hollywood.
No more guns, dog. No more bullets!
No more bullets.
Let's get this out of the way right now. Since the Baba Yaga's debut in 2014, there have been a ton of clones, including Monkey Man, Sisu, Nobody, Violent Night, In a Valley of Violence, which is a movie about Ethan Hawke getting revenge after his dog is murdered.
Here he comes now, Gilly.
Get away from my dog.
Hollywood has no problem cloning successes, but it never quite figured out what specifically made John Wick such a worthy investment. If they did, we'd be drowning in lower budget original IP instead of being attacked by the clones. Luckily for us, John Wick's producer Basil Iwanek spelled out the secret of the franchise's success in the book They Shouldn't Have Killed His Dog by Edward Gross and Mark A. Altman, saying, "I was in the market for action movies. Action movies you can make for $25 million plus or minus 5. It's the most obvious thing in the world, but no one seems to understand that. If you hit the number right, which is not hard to do, your downside's protected, but you still have a tremendous upside."
I'd say after 4 entries, $1 billion in box office revenue, a TV series spinoff, and a new movie spinoff starring Ana de Armas, Iwanek nailed it.
Which is wild considering it all started with a $20 to $30 million investment. Iwanek understood 2 really important things. Action movies are hugely accessible, and if you can make an action movie on a modestly small budget, which is how they were done decades ago, it's almost impossible to lose money on it. But when he says it's not hard to do, he's being modest. A few things had to fall into place for Iwanek to hit his budget and for John Wick to turn out as good as it did. And his first lucky break was finding an action star in a slump. Listen, there's no doubt that Keanu is a star, but in the early 2010s, his stock was definitely trending down. He was making movies like 47 Ronin, Man of Tai Chi, and The Day the Earth Stood Still. It seemed like his Matrix days were definitely behind him. It was around this time when Keanu's agent was trying to drum up some action work for his client when he reached out to his old friend Basil Iwanek, who sent over a freshly acquired script about a 75-year-old hitman who goes on a spree after his dog was murdered, accompanied by a note for Keanu. Clearly, you're not 75.
Is that a screenplay?
Well, that's what you're gonna tell me.
This hitman coming out of retirement role was perfect for the action star on the verge of his 50s who understood how the discipline of learning complex fight choreography was similar to the discipline needed to portray the Baba Yaga.
Well, you know, I always want to do as much as I possibly can because I think action should be tied to character and to emotion and to the story. So the more that I can do, and the directors wanted to do long takes and not make it cutty, but the more that you can see me and go on, you know, the journey with the character, the more emotional it is, the more connection you have. And in terms of like, you know, running up and down stairs and being 50, you just become more efficient.
More efficient
in terms of how you learn, what you do, what you can't do, what you can do.
Keanu was in, and Iwanek needed someone like Keanu. He's a recognizable face for the poster, a proven box office draw, albeit not at the moment, and much needed ammo for an independent film producer trying to keep his antsy financiers at bay. But this is an independent action movie, so if they wanted to splurge on number 1 on the call sheet, they were going to have to cut back on budget elsewhere. That's when they decided to get thrifty and bring some untested directors up to the major leagues. Enter Chad Stahelski and David Leitch. They go way back in stunt work. Stahelski worked as a stunt double for Brandon Lee on The Crow and with Keanu on The Matrix.
First and foremost, I'm Keanu Reeves stunt double.
Leitch also has an impressive stunt resume, including V for Vendetta, I Am Legend, and Blade. Stahelski and Leitch weren't just stunt guys, they were also entrepreneurs, and in 1997, they had a great idea. They started the action design company 8711, which helps filmmakers choreograph and create pre-viz movie fights. Basically, they used their gym to test out and improvise fight choreography and camera angles that would inform how a scene would eventually be shot.
8711 was the first to really kind of take this model of stunts and say, okay, we're going to train our own people, we're going to train other people, we're going to create this culture of performing, directing.
Action movies are expensive, but 8711's ability to design fights in a gym with a small, relatively inexpensive team is a huge boon for a small budgeted action flick because it makes the creative process cheaper, thus allowing for more of the budget to be put on screen. Plus, when they actually shoot the scene, using a big crew of grips, camera, audio, armorers, stunt and safety personnel, it's all business. They already know the moves they need to execute and the shots needed to make it all work in the editing room. So while Keanu is just stacking bodies during this home invasion, or in a nightclub, or in a parking lot, almost no time was wasted while shooting because Stahelski and Leitch did their homework. Everything from the blocking, to the camera work, to the fight's digital squibs were planned before anybody walked on set. Remember, Basil Iwanek was convinced that if he could make John Wick for just $25 million, there was no way he can lose money. Using the 8711 method for designing the action scenes, which are the majority of the film, allowed the John Wick team to think cheap and minimize the time needed to do the expensive part, shooting the fights. The necessity for the film to come in on budget, no matter what, led to one of the franchise's often imitated aesthetic decisions, the long, unbroken takes on action. When John Wick came out, they said it was a stylistic choice.
They opened up the cinema of the action. You know, it had a lot of long takes and sequences.
And because we wanted to show longer takes and didn't want to do what has been now more of a shaky cam, more music video style of cutting, cut for all the fight scenes, we wanted to just show off Keanu.
But by the third film, the truth came out.
On the first John Wick, we had an extremely limited budget. Most of what we did practical long takes is because we simply couldn't afford a second camera.
Here's just another example of the old adage, limitation breeds creativity. Arguably, John Wick's primary stylistic contribution to the genre was born because they didn't have the budget to shoot their action scenes the way a larger budgeted movie would have. When the high table minted more coins for the larger sequels, Stahelski, who would take on sole director credit for the sequels, didn't go back to the bigger budget way of doing things. Instead, they innovated more. But we'll get to the sequels in a bit. I still got some gushing left on the fight choreography and how Stahelski and Leitch used production design to achieve one of the other big stylistic choices of John Wick fights.
I love architecture. I love figuring out ways to make set pieces more intricate into the action. John Wick just gives the opportunity to let loose a little bit, help create something that's original.
While it isn't the most obvious, the production design, especially in these early John Wick fights, significantly contributes to two things the franchise's fights have become known for: John Wick's gaudy, hyper-saturated, color-soaked lighting design, and set layouts that add to the drama, getting in John's way as much or more than the henches he's dispatched. These sets are almost a character in and of themselves. Look at how Stahelski and Leitch use the Edison Ballroom in Times Square for this club scene fight. Every section of the hall, from the dance floor to the staircase to the balconies, was used to slow down John as he chased a towel-clad Yosef, all while ridding NYC of a couple dozen mobsters. But John Wick's memorable moments don't just end with the fight scenes and gun fu. There was also a sick car chase. Fight scenes alone does not a great action franchise make. Car chases are a must. John Wick's climactic car chase, where John basically uses his car as a weapon to swipe, hit, and otherwise incapacitate Vigo's goons long enough so he can reach out of the car and shoot them, has a little bit of everything that a great car chase needs. E-brake 180s, donuts, cars getting absolutely totaled, and falling off cliffs. It's all there. Let's be absolutely clear. Nothing about car chases are cheap, but just because the production wasn't able to flash the cash yet, it was still able to squeeze in a quality Act 3 car chase. This car chase is a masterclass in cutting corners to save money without sacrificing the cinematic thrill of the chase, and it's thanks to two really thrifty choices made by Stahelski and Leitch. Thrifty choice number 1. The chase takes place in one location. While I'm sure it wasn't cheap to lock down the Brooklyn Naval Yard, it had to be cheaper than paying to close down multiple city streets, which in New York City can definitely be pricey. By localizing the car chase to one location and shooting at night when there's not a ton of dock work happening, definitely helped the production stretch its budget. But it wasn't the only thing the production did to save some coins. Thrifty choice number 2. They picked reasonably priced modern cars. Cars like Wick's Dodge Challenger and the Mob's Chevy Tahoes are such ubiquitous cars in the US, they looked like they rolled off a Hertz lot that morning. Plus, to get all the shots they needed, they had to buy multiple versions of each car. Sure, Challengers and Tahoes aren't the cheapest cars, but they are by no means luxury cars or classics, which when used could dramatically increase the cost of a car chase. Would it have been nice to see John tool around in that sick Chevelle doing stunts and shooting goons? Sure, but does the car model John was driving make or break this scene? No. That's a big part of what made the John Wick filmmakers so good at their job. They made calculated choices on how to maximize their budget for maximum action. When John Wick was released in 2014, it made $86 million worldwide on its $25 million budget, proving Iwanic to be correct on his gamble. That roughly 4x return from just the box office, never mind physical and digital media sales and streaming rights, would prove to be more than enough to double down on a sequel and do what sequels do best: escalate the action. One of the main things that made the John Wick franchise so successful was that the franchise's formula was distilled so crystally clear in the first one that all they had to do was improve on it in the sequels. In doing so, Chad Stahelski and David Leitch were able to reduce the budding action franchise's formula down to its key ingredients, including showcasing new combat styles, set design with super saturated lighting that works as an obstructing character in a fight scene, and car chases that function as fights. And because the success of the John Wick franchise has been in leveraging its creativity to not think outside the box, but in it, every sequel is built on doing more of those three things. For John Wick Chapter 2, their budget was doubled to $40 million, and you could see where that budget went within the first minute of the film. Gone are the cars that looked like they were rented that morning. With $40 million, John could afford to f*** up a few classic Mustangs as he tears around a taxi depot, wiping out what's left of the Russian mob from the first film. The fight scenes also featured more complex combat styles. Keanu trained for months learning 3-gun shooting, which they used to make Chapter 2's gun fu fights significantly more sophisticated than the first. John Wick Chapter 2 was another success for the franchise. In 2017, it made $171 million worldwide at the box office. Not Avengers money, but enough to ensure that being excommunicado isn't going to stop the high table from exacting their revenge on John while cameras roll. For John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum, Iwanic brought even more cash to the high table, almost doubling the budget again to $75 million. And again, the Wick team found success by working with their limitations and using more of the same ingredients that made the previous entry so successful. The film's production design is the perfect example of this. Stahelski and co. needed to design a new set that would push the John Wick production design philosophy that a set could be a character itself past the trippy Hall of Mirrors fight.
So we thought the coolest place to hide ninjas was a place that you can't hide anything, which is an entire house made out of glass.
Talk about limitations breeding creativity. To pull off this illusion of cinematography, multiple departments, including the grip, camera, stunt, and production design teams, all had to work together to create a set that offered tantalizingly small slivers of shadow for ninjas to hide in plain sight. But that was all just lighting and camera blocking. Let's not forget the brutal fight choreography, stunt work, and mini glass panes that had to give their lives for this fight to be so exhilarating.
I will remember you.
The glass house set might have been the film's most sophisticated piece of production design, but the film's most sophisticated fight was definitely the fight at the Mint. Sophia's dog foo fighting style needed a ton of time to develop. Her Belgian Malinois were trained since birth for this fight scene, not only to listen and act on command, but more importantly, to stay calm on set, especially one as hectic as a John Wick set.
What most people don't know is when you see a dog attack a stunt person or a trainer on camera, it's a dog trying to kill the individual. The dog doesn't know it's a movie.
Safety is paramount, not only for the dogs, but also the stunt performers. When 60 pounds of murder floof is coming for your arm, your leg, or your balls, you want to make sure the dog is hitting its mark. The Malinois fight wasn't the only sequence where Parabellum was pushing the limits of animal action. Keanu also did extensive equestrian training so he could do all the stunt riding in the horse chase through the streets of Brooklyn. They even built this huge-ass rig to shoot the scene. It pretty much did everything. Held all the safety wires for Keanu and the horse, held cameras mounted everywhere, and even had programmable lights to make it look like John Wick and his trusty steed were running past the street lights. While all this was done for real, the crew did have to lay down rubber pads on the road to make it safe for the horse to run, which meant that all the streets had to be digitally replaced. This was the first John Wick film to lean heavily into visual effects. The motorcycle katana fight on the Verrazano Bridge was pretty much all CGI, and they relied on CGI for the glass and some throwing knives in this knife fight, mostly because that was probably the only safe way to shoot these things. Parabellum was the franchise's biggest success at the time, bringing in over $327 million worldwide. That's the kind of return that gets you a 9-figure budget for a sequel, and for John Wick Chapter 4, that's exactly what they did. Coming in at 2 hours and 50 minutes with only 380 words spoken by John Wick, which, by the way, this video has 10 times more words than John Wick said in all of Chapter 4.
You dead, John?
Chapter 4 provides an obnoxious amount of time that Chad Stahelski gleefully filled. With a $100 million budget, they designed action sequences so bombastic the filmmakers could actually tweak the tried and true formula for John's final showdown with the High Table. The Arc de Triomphe car foo fight is a perfect example of this expanded ambition and arguably the most sophisticated sequence of the franchise, because it's a car chase, a shootout, and a brawl all in one. Despite not actually being on location at the Arc, it's not any less impressive, mostly because all the stunts and actions still feel real. Besides all the training and prep, it took a small army of stunt people to do all the driving, combat, and collisions, which used dummy cars replaced in post to make the impacts feel more real. The end result is an action scene that uses CGI not to fake any of the stunts, but to transpose the action from an airport in Germany to the Arc. The car chase wasn't the only part that elevated the action in 4. This chapter features multiple sets that prove Chapter 4 was on the top of its set design game. The Osaka Continental fight alone could have been the climax fight in any of the other movies, but that was just an amuse-bouche for Killa's nightclub fight and the stair fight, which all do what John Wick production design has been known for: visually stylized locations that do their part to get in John's way, while still not giving all these nameless goons a prayer of a chance. It may have taken 4 films for the High Table to finally put John Wick into an early grave, but that provided some of the most iconic action to come out of Hollywood in the past decade. It's insane to think that John Wick managed to single-handedly fight his way into what's left of our monoculture, despite not being a beloved comic, novel, or old intellectual property of some sort. While the John Wick sequels continue to expand the aesthetic horizons of modern action sequences by going bigger and bigger, none have matched the brilliance of the first. The first John Wick's plot, the elegantly simple Theon Greyjoy murdered my dog, now I must murder him and his whole crime syndicate, makes literally every person who watches that film instantly empathize with the reluctant hero, which is the key to the whole franchise. Basil Iwanek understood that when you pan for gold, if you're really lucky, you might not find huge nuggets, but a little bit of gold dust. The empathy that was baked into the plot of John Wick 1 was that gold dust, and all it took was $25 million to prove there was a vein of gold rich with action. so much so that they were able to mine about $1 billion in box office revenue, as the franchise used a bunch of minted gold coins, blood markers, high tables, and the ninja-trained homeless to yes and itself into bigger budgets, crazier fight scenes, and meatier box office returns. All the while, the audience never quite forgot the simple reason why they were rooting for John in the first place: because his dog was murdered. We all know that Hollywood is in an eternal rat race. It's why the DCEU never had a chance. WB execs wanted to hit the ground running, making Avengers money, and totally forgetting that the MCU spent 5 years building to that payday. To me, John Wick is an even more impressive success than the MCU, not because of the subjective quality of the films or the amount of money made at the box office, because at one time, all John Wick was a movie script on a pile of other scripts. It had no fans, it had no outside hype, it was just fate. Basil Iwanek was looking for a $25 million action movie to produce. He stumbled on an aging hitman and over 4 films turned it into one of the few new original movie franchises to gross over $1 billion. The best stories always have humble beginnings. If Hollywood wants to show audiences something new and cool, it just needs to start small and give them time to grow. Because if this video is meant to teach you anything, it's that limitation breeds creativity. And that's what this entire industry runs on. Hey everybody, thanks so much for watching. If you like these breakdowns of action scenes, be sure to check out our top 10 practical effects of all time, or check out our podcast, Cinefix Top 100. And for everything else, be sure to subscribe to Cinefix.